All right, this is the RUSHCAST episode 2, I guess you would say. We got our first guest here. We have Chris Searl sitting here right next to us. And yeah, we just thought we'd get right into it because we were already chatting.
For the last like 10, 15 minutes,
yeah, we thought that we were
all
maybe just
going
going
to material.
Yeah, just hit record and just kind of
Probably
continue.
shouldn't take a drink right on immediately, but
No, I mean, I got this. I was actually going to offer you some coffee if you wanted some coffee.
No, I'd be going to the bathroom a couple times during this podcast, bro.
So introduce yourself to the people.
Yes, Chris Searl's the name. I am an X/2B once again podcaster. Met this man online at first, but we finally linked up, I'd say, about a year and a half ago. I'm really bad at time concept right now.
It was when I first moved up to Halifax for...
So yeah, about a year and a half then, because it would have been end of summer, start of fall, probably. Or did you move earlier than that?
I moved up when the program started in the fall of 2021, and at the time I didn't have a place to stay because I got accepted at the program like 2 weeks
remember
before
you were by Kayla's place. You were by the Rotary.
Yeah.
Remember that? That was weird.
Well, what happened was because I was staying at my buddy Mickey's dad's place at the time while I tried to find a place to stay, and I eventually found this place. But yeah, you came. And what did I do? I walked up the street and I met you. You brought a Budweiser with you.
Yeah,
we killed a beer.
We killed a beer by that school.
Yeah, looking at a baseball field.
Yeah, and remember that lady? She was sitting on her doorstep when we turned around to leave.
Yeah, I do remember that lady. What was the issue with that lady?
From talking to people since then. I don't think we've ever actually talked about this. I've told the story like, oh, met Mitch, we did this, and I told like 2 people. The first person I told, they were like, bro, like they've owned those properties forever. They don't want anybody up there doing anything. They probably call the cops on you guys.
Because it was a dead end street.
Yeah, but they were like, there's a couple of places in the city that's still so secluded to like the general area. And apparently that's one of them. Because when I told my buddy Tyler, like weeks later, finally met Mitch Bailey, blah, 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 blah. We killed a beer up at this school, man. The people up there were weird. He told me a story about like he parked up there after work one day. They called the cops. Cops pulled up, searched the whole car, blah, blah, blah. Found
really?
Like,
well,
I guess
really
it's
really
just
secluded area.
It's not because it's right by one of the busiest freaking.
It's right up from the Rotary.
It's so
Halifax,
busy,
yeah.
but it's
Joseph Howe.
It's because it's like I'm guessing it's a private area, a private turnoff, and there's a lot of those. You'll find them in the South End. You'll find them everywhere. Honestly, everywhere. Like I grew up in Eastern Passage. The trailer parks are also like privately owned and stuff too. So. But yeah, like I remember that just so clearly because we didn't really do anything. Like yeah, sure we were drinking publicly. I was smoking weed, but like when we
nonchalant, there was still the sun.
There was nobody outside, and like when we turned to leave, like everybody seemed to be on their front doorstep, like watering their garden or checking their car or on the phone.
I thought they were just welcoming me into the neighborhood.
Not that neighborhood, apparently, bro. No, not that neighborhood, apparently.
They're not too welcoming there. So, how did you get your start? So, when you come back, actually, coming back to this here, you said you're going to launch your podcast again. Is it going to be the same? My name is Searl.
Yeah, definitely keeping the format. In fact, it's going to be kind of funny because there's going to be a lot of, yourself will be on, a lot of repeat guests. It's going to kind of be like the alternate universe. Like, we did this during COVID. Now it's like a year, I'd say. It was December 2021 was my last episode. So now we're talking, it'll be like 13, 14 months by the time the new episode comes out. But I started out years and years ago, actually, when seeing you guys graduating here this year. It's super cool because like I think back to when I was in school. I'm an old man. I never got to the point where I'm at where you guys are at right now, where you start to see the fulfillment, the next step of your career. It's exciting to like see your story now get to that next level because I never did, but I also told you like you've inspired me to get back into it, and hopefully the plan will be whether the next year, 2 years or so, I'll be back in school and hopefully doing the same thing you guys are doing. But I actually like had a little podcast that I ran out of my place on Vernon Street, which we were talking about those times off air. And it was always something that I wanted to follow through on, but I never had the time. Fast forward to doing this actual iteration of My Name is Searl. The part of the reason why I never got after or past that first season into the second season was because I really didn't have the time anymore. And time is definitely tough when you work, you have a kid, It's not easy to structure, whether it's actually talking to somebody, editing, preparing, booking. A month became 2 months, became 6 months. Next thing I knew, it was a year out from where it was. But yeah, I know my name is Searl. The show that I'm bringing back next week comes from the stems of another podcast called Down the Pub, which we did our first actual interview. Was it our first? I know I was on your Instagram Live, but was that before or after?
I think that was before because that was a primarily soccer show, right? And I was kind of the first guest to come on that
wasn't soccer. I think you're still the only one in theory.
Right, yeah. That podcast is still going to this day.
Oh, goodness, yes.
Anthony
Abbott.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. I will be shouting out a few people over the time that we chat here. But without Anthony, there'd be no podcast. There'd be really no interest in the field. Seeing him basically record that in his office. Right. And finding the time in between his job, and now he's got twin boys, and he still inspires me to this day as much as he inspired me when I first met him. And I hopped on his show for the first time with a gentleman named Steve Steele. Shout out to him. You'll be hearing a lot of him in the next the coming years as Searl comes back. But Steve has blessed me with some of my favorite sound bites from that first season, man. And I'll never forget, we were talking basketball, and the debate and the heat around the table immediately told me, like, man, I need my own show. But I never really wanted to do it. I was really loving the Down the Pub essence. I was really loving being a part of Anthony booking, me and Carlos joining him. We got to talk to, professional soccer players. We got to talk to media members in the field, especially somebody like Andy Petrillo. For me, she was such a huge inspiration. We got to talk with her when she was drinking wine in her hotel the day before the Island games. Robbie Lyle, who's a big UK journalist, big Arsenal fan. Carl Valentine, who played for the '86 Canadian national team. Like, we were knocking out like type of bucket list interviews. So being a part of that was great, but then fatherhood got in the way. So having my own project would have made it a heck of a lot easier for me to defer the time. And Anthony and Carlos created another venture called The Early Bath, which was mostly MLS focused, soccer for the people that have no idea what MLS means. They're like, MLS Realty? But yeah, no, I started the show. I got to stop clapping on the mic. Started the show. My first guest was Alex de Careless, former Halifax Wanderer. I had Brian Lavelle on very early, former Halifax Moosehead. I had you on. And then just some friends and people that I enjoy talking to. And, you know, the cut and dry copy paste of podcasting, you want to get the biggest name for the biggest outreach. But a lot of my friends that focused on those type of podcasts, their podcasts kind of came and went. You know, it was too stressful, or they weren't quite hitting the metrics that they wanted. I had no pressure. And, you know, chatting with you, 3 or 4 times you were on my show. I had a mixed martial arts kind of side show called The 10 Count with Jay Brew and Jay Truth, who now goes by Jonathan Cross, professional wrestler. We just talked MMA, wrestling, and MMA, wrestling, and boxing, and just enjoyed our time together. And like, that was what Searl became, and that's what Searl was. And I watched the metrics that I had aimed for myself actually start to peak. And you know, people like yourself who have a platform and a following, your shares always used to mean so much. And that networking aspect of podcasting was something that just drew me to it and kept me with it. But the timing couldn't have been any better or worse, because as the first season was finishing up, I was literally editing the last episode, was going to take a few months off to focus on being a dad and getting my work life back in order. And my son went and spilled a whole glass of juice on my laptop and lost everything. So thank God for Anchor. Contacted them, and I was like, because when you upload it on the site, it's not quite as perfect. I was like, I would need my masters back. They literally sent me an email with everything back. I was very, very lucky in that aspect. But you know, again, January became February, became June, became December. Holy smokes, it's been a year since I've done an episode. I got to get back on my horse. So I was saving up money, man, and you know, Christmas morning, surprises happened, and my family must have ponied up some bucks and got me a laptop, and I couldn't believe it. I was so thankful. So I was able to take the money that I was saving up to get a mixer and to even potentially do the camera thing and make something of it. So yeah, I'm excited, man. And it's starting next week. I guess it would be this week or the week before when this is out. But I'm so excited to get back into it. Finally, man, it's been one of the biggest blessings of my life, being able to have conversation, to curate it, and to share it with people. I've been blessed, and great guests like yourself make it easy, man, for sure.
Well, likewise, man. And when you mentioned as well, like when you first got into co-hosting down the pub, yep. And you said I didn't know that you had guests like Andy Petrillo,
yeah,
legendary
man.
Soccer sports journalist
yeah,
here in Canada.
Man.
What was it like? Did you feel like would you feel prepared going into that? Like, what was it like asking those questions? Did you have any sense of like imposter syndrome sometimes, or like were you confident that you had like credible questions that they would?
That's a good question.
Challenge them.
That's a really good question, actually. I'm cutting off your question.
No,
it's a good question. I'm excited to answer the question. Anthony is incredibly structured with his show, which is why it's lasted as long as it has. He's continued it with Gary now more so, but not saying for a fault. Just make sure you got a couple questions. We're gonna organize it and structure it this way. There were times I'd go into that show with no questions. And there were also times where I knew that like I'd be the first person to ask a question. And God bless him. I love Carlos. Carlos was such a fantastic guy to work with. Carlos's questions were like my answers are right now, like really long-winded. They would lead with something, and then he'd ask the question, and then sometimes he'd answer his own question. And English isn't his first language, so it was like kind of cool, not so much deferring to him, but allowing him to take up a lot of the longer question energy to allow him to get his point across. So we got some of the best answers from Carlos's questions during the time that we were working together. But to answer your question, no, because even if I wasn't necessarily well prepared, like if I had a busy night with my son and we had to record like 5 minutes after he was in bed, I grew up loving sports. I grew up loving the news. I grew up loving journalism. And like my idols growing up were freaking Peter Code, the weatherman, and Stephen A. Smith on ESPN. So like I had the gift of gab at a young age, where like my parents even said before, like back to when I can't even remember, when I'd be like playing by myself in my room, I would be an announcer. Like I would be Bob Cole from CBC or something, like just trying to like make something of the games I was playing, if you will. But it just translated as the years went on. Like I stayed interested in the field. And once I finally got into the field part-time, working through Rogers, doing some editing and stuff for a lot of their properties, I realized that those early days of like, sitting in front of the television and watching the news, not cartoons or whatever was on, it was going to pay off long form. So those days and those interviews where I wasn't prepared, I just kind of had the built skills from being a geek when I was a kid, for lack of better terms. But yeah, no, imposter syndrome, never. I felt like I did a great job with Anthony, and then it translated pretty well, I would think, into my own show. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but from what I've heard from other people, it's something to listen to, where even if you're not interested in the topic at hand, just hearing people go on and on and on, it's what we are. It's like, it's literally what it is now. It's media has changed, the consumption of media has changed, and I never thought we'd live in a world where people having conversations with people are the most popular medium. It's wild.
Yeah, it's interesting how that has risen, like has rose to popularity, because I myself would way rather listen to a 3-hour long in-depth conversation about a particular topic than listen to like a 10-minute video that's kind of like summarizing something. 'Cause now I kind of feel like, because that has become the norm, I don't necessarily feel confident in actually in my ability to like fully understand a particular subject and listen to it, unless I listen to somebody talk about it uninterrupted for a long period of time.
And it can be 5 to 15 minutes, or it could be, like you said, a 3-hour show. Like right now, one of my favorite people is Russell Brand, and I've always enjoyed Russell Brand's content, more so because he carves out the moderate space and just literally exposes what we should already be blatantly seeing, but maybe it takes a little bit of digging to actually find what's going on. And like, I'm not going to get into any of the topics or anything. Like, well, I mean, we can if you'd like to, but somebody like Russell has taken that 5 to 15 minute time frame and just exploded with it. And then you've got your
But he's a guy that when you listen to him, you know that you can trust what he's saying.
Oh, 100%.
And you can tell that he has a team that is like diligently doing the research and providing it to him, and he reads through it, and then...
And even if like you don't... agree or trust.
Right.
It's about how he presents himself and the conduct and this is why, like, I'm not a big Fox News guy, but I could watch Fox News because the way they carry themselves and present themselves is better put than CNN. I used to work for NBC, so I can say it out loud. NBC, same thing. Canadian news media, I find it's cookie cutter carved, copy paste type stuff.
Yeah, like Canadian Press, Newswire.
Yes, and like, I'm not hating.
No,
on
me
it
either.
at
I mean,
all.
it's a necessity.
And politically, I am left leaning strong, but like I try to see things from a moderate space. I've always been that type of person, that type of way. So when I see somebody like Russell Brand be able to expel so much information in such a brief amount of time, and people kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, relay it, I suppose, to others. Like, you need to see his channel grow the way it has. You know that, like you said, it's a trustworthy source of information. But even if you disagree, it's a conduct or it's a presentation that you can debate with and against internally or externally.
And he's open in that pursuit of trying to hear alternative perspectives as well, and he platforms them nicely. And he shows and cites his sources, where he's getting his information from. A majority of the time, it's typically from, you know, a mainstream outlet or a highly credible outlet or like a scientific, like peer-reviewed paper or something like that. So it's not like he's just observing stuff that's happening and coming to his own conclusion without providing his audience with the necessary information as he's talking about it. And so it's like right there, like you could show it to somebody, because if you look at his, like, the titles of his videos and some of the thumbnails, obviously they're quite clickbaity, which is, you know, it's like, you know, you won't believe this. So like, this is the end, and it's like a photo of him, and he's like this, and it's like something circled on the screen, and it's like Putin or Trump or Zelensky, and then, but all of his, I think you could send that to anybody, and they would think that the conclusions he comes to are quite reasonable. Whether it's talking about some of the corruption and motives behind some of the tactics, like pharmaceutical companies, for examples, are using to, you know, distribute their product and stuff. I feel like it's stuff worth questioning, and he makes a good case for it. And then I like at the end, he's like, this is just what I think, after making a very compelling point for 15 minutes.
Which is a very important aspect of it. Like, I'm not preaching this to you. You can disagree.
For sure.
We can have dialogue about this. And, you know, I brought up Fox News. They're very CNN. They're very, we don't want to debate. We want to tell you our side of the story.
Yeah.
And now I think what's happened is the directive has changed. Like, freedom of speech used to be a very liberal concept, and now it's a completely conservative concept. Like, it's
quite interesting.
It's strange.
It doesn't seem like the people, but it's weird how the people that still have stuck to those beliefs now, if they point out some hypocrisy in an opinion that comes from somebody who is currently labeled as liberal, if it's like anti-free speech, then that person by them is labeled problematic. And it's like, they didn't change their political views, they stayed the same. The definition is kind of
that's it.
switched.
And I think that's why, as much as I am a more left-leaning person, my media consumption is very right-leaning. Yeah. Because a lot of the moral, social, and political concepts on the left that I agreed with that made me left-leaning, like you said, they're moving. Like, I don't watch the Tim Pools and the Crowders of the world, but I'll watch the clips, because the topics they're discussing is being completely ditched on the other side of things. I grew up, I'm not trying to, like, you guys aren't young, but I'm old. I grew up where the late night monologue was that Russell Brand. And you had Leno, you had Letterman, you had guys who, they might be one way or the other politically, but when they were on television, they were right down the middle. Didn't matter who the president was. They were always
they could identify when there was flaws.
And even modern guys, Kimmel, Fallon, Colbert, big time even before Trump. But I found like Trump was that before after moment, like that before after thing. And
you had to pick a side after Trump, essentially.
And like, I use Fallon as the example. Fallon had Trump on the show leading up to the presidency.
He's messing with his hair.
Yeah, like, and people loved it. This is amazing. Even if you didn't like Trump, even if you were a liberal, like, you loved it. When Trump won, you should see the comments on that video now. It's either your right people who are like, or your left people who are like, I can't believe that Jimmy, if it wasn't for Jimmy, Trump wouldn't be president. Like, just the hyperbole. And that's where we're at right now, man, is like, it's one or the other. And it's like the minority is the people in the middle who are both.
Do you think that the people in the middle are more common than they might appear to be based off the media? Because the media needs polarization for it to be worth clicking on.
And I do firmly believe that a lot of people who openly claim they're one or the other to try to fit into a circle are actually moderate. And I know friends that are that way. And it frustrates me because that's where the tribalism and the team structure that we shouldn't even have anywhere near politics becomes the norm. It's the forefront. You have to be one or the other.
It's become like a team sport.
Listen, bro, I'm 0 for 5 voting for prime minister since I could vote, man. Because, like, I never voted for Harper until the year he lost to Trudeau. And I ain't voting for Trudeau.
Interesting. It's like it took a while for you to get on point. Usually it's the opposite. People get sick of the leader and then they eventually switch.
The thing with Harper that actually grabbed my attention, I wasn't anti-Trudeau at first, but the thing with Harper towards the end of his terms that grabbed my attention was the fact that fiscally he really wanted to put Canada to the next level, and Canada was on its way. Then when Trudeau came in, we all know the cliff it fell off, and COVID didn't help. Let's be real. Like, it's not completely his fault, and this is where I'd say to a lot of people, like, even if you want to blame the man, see how it's not his fault. Because if you don't actually go to the opposite, how do you get to your point? What are you disagreeing with that this is?
Well, you have to allow yourself to be able to debate and defend your ideas. To
Vulnerability.
See if bulletproof.
Yes, brother. And that's why I consume more conservative media, because
you have to see where the holes are in your argument.
And I laugh at it sometimes, man. I can't watch Sean Hannity without cracking up. Like,
I can't watch Sean Hannity. Tucker Carlson could be quite compelling.
Tucker's different for me. And I mean, right now I'm way off the Tucker train right now. I think he's just gotten a little bit too I'm trying to think of the right word. Too reactive.
Of course.
And not really channeling things. Love Greg Gutfeld, for example.
Well, he was a comedian, wasn't he? Because he's like the most popular late night host.
Gutfeld is perfect. And he's got libertarians and Democrats on the show all the time. So it's like he has more time, though, of the night to figure out what I'm going to talk about. Your Tuckers, your Laura Ingrams, your Sean Hannitys. It's funny because 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Super
reactive, moderately reactive, a little bit reactive. And Tucker is a little bit reactive, but now I found recently he's a little bit over the top. But
I find it so strange when I out of curiosity, will watch some of his monologues, and he does this thing where he laughs, almost in like this manic, insane way, and it's kind of frightening.
He gets to me now, man. Like, I actually, like, he was part of my rotation of nightly viewing, and was one of the very few right-leaning Republican things that I've been watching for a while. But like, I grew up when he was on
MSNBC?
No, CNN. What was
Didn't he have a show with Rachel Maddow?
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
She recently did an article earlier this year, and she actually praised him. Although ideologically they're complete opposites, but
that's possible.
I thought that was interesting for her to at least applaud him for his.
What was the name of that? Was it Ceasefire or something like that?
I
can't remember the name of it. And like, Jon Stewart went on that show and just absolutely positively butchered them. Basically, on the topic we're talking about right now is like, stop being tribalistic, stop arguing, stop fighting. Let's agree.
Yeah.
And even if we don't agree, let's find the space where we can.
Do you think Jon Stewart is capable of doing that right now?
Man, we could do an hour on that guy. That man is for sure my biggest inspiration. That Comedy Central was like our break into adulthood. Crank Yankers, Jon Stewart, Band Show. There were a couple other shows on there too, but like the late night roasts, and we got to learn like basically the base of modern comedy and modern news anchors, like, because a lot of these guys, like you said, Gutfeld came from a stand-up background. Crowder came from a comedy background. He was an
actor, wasn't he?
Well, he was a voice actor. He was
I don't know much about him.
Arthur.
He's the one that did like the "There is two genders, prove me wrong."
No, that's see,
those
guys I can't fuck with at all. Sorry if you can't swear on the show.
You can.
The Daily Wire guys, I'm not a big fan of. Not a big fan of those guys. I can listen to Ben Shapiro talk for hours, but he's still kind of like...
You can't do the Matt Walsh.
I can't do Matt Walsh. The other guy is kind of...
I don't know. The only ones I'm really familiar with is Ben and Matt Walsh. And
Candace. Ugh. Jordan Peterson now, like...
I don't think you can't rope Jordan Peterson in with the... I know he does a show with them now, but...
Yeah.
he's a complex individual, obviously.
Very complex
and he is highly credible as well. With, like, most cited professor, University of Toronto, I believe.
He's another guy where it's like, even if you disagree with him, you gotta listen to him. Like, I
love listening to him speak, man.
Yeah, well, that's just it.
It's same with Russell Brand, the ability to kind of, like...
And that could be a tool used the wrong way, which is like we were just talking about Fox News. Tucker is good at what he does.
He demands your attention, but he's not as well spoken as the other two.
And
sure.
it like now it's just like, even if you don't want to listen to conservative media, you hear it. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. And whether it's independent media, mainstream media, and I hate when, like, you know, the mainstream media, you're the mainstream media too, Fox.
For sure. Well, if anything, they're more mainstream media than the competing networks. 100%. Because Tucker has the highest ratings. But he does that show in Maine.
It's the tribalism, bro. It's the tribalism.
Do you find it weird that Tucker does a show in Maine? Doesn't he do a show in Maine? It's like in New Brunswick, man.
This is it, bro.
We could be guests by tonight.
This is it. Like, somebody like him, when he was on CNN, he was getting made fun of. Everybody thought his career was over once he left that show. And next thing you know, you said it. I think he's the #1 news show. Gutfeld's the #1 talk show.
I remember they compared Joe Rogan's ratings in with all of that last year, and he had about 11 million viewers per episode. I think Tucker came second with like 3.2. But 3.2 million viewers tuning in. I don't know if that's a correct number, so I could be totally wrong. But
the thing too, I say this, and I'm working in the space, working for Rogers, I got to learn about all of this metric stuff, and I'm sure you guys have
talk about that a bit. Let's transition into that.
It was just literally like throwing paper into the wind one day, and I ended up I was playing Pokemon Go actually down at the waterfront, and a lady came up to me and she asked me a couple of questions, and she says, "You have an incredible voice, and you have, you know, good direction, and blah 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 blah. Would you be interested?" And then I was like, "That's funny, cuz." And I showed her some of the stuff I had done in the past, and yeah, it was. I was on the outside looking in. Working for Comcast was a lot more fun. Working for NBC, but it was basically source editing stuff. They'd send you the next to finished product, or hey, here's this, but we need you to call this person or talk to this person. Then we'd record the conversation, run it back to the editors, they'd put it out, and you'd get like small credits on the bottom of the page and stuff. I didn't really do a whole lot for Rogers on that space because I had only just gotten the job with Rogers right before COVID. Like, it was pretty much 3 months, bro. It couldn't have gone any worse for me, and I had left the job with Comcast, San Diego 7, NBC 7, San Diego. Fucking miss those guys so much. I still talk to them.
You're doing that all remotely, right? You were doing
all remote, yeah.
You weren't living in San Diego.
So the beauty was that because I had done that work with NBC, I had more experience than a lot of the students that Rogers were hiring. So I was getting to do some pretty neat, pretty interesting, pretty fun shit that people would take 5-10 years to do, is because I had the experience. But when COVID came, the cuts came, and when the cuts came, off I went. And I have faith now, like I said, seeing you guys doing what you guys are doing, and the fact that, like, you're working for Global already, like, that's tremendous. Like, you've already done what people that have been in the space for 5-10 years couldn't do, but it's because you need that piece of paper. And I learned that a lot working with both, that in education and knowledge and learning from the experts, yeah, you learn 10 times more on the job, as I'm sure you guys have learned. But you really need to have that direction and that drive early from the people that are going to be able to put you in the right places, in the right spaces. I got lucky. I say it to people all the time. I literally hit pocket aces 5 times in a row. But then I also ended up losing to Trip Kings in the end because COVID happened and really took the wind out of my sails. But to put the full wrap on that, like I said already off the air and on the air, like what you guys are doing, seeing your story and how quickly you've been able to do this. Like, I'm there. You got a kid, and then you got a job, and you got to make sure so it's harder for me to actually, talking about podcasts, carving out time, carving out space. But I'm not young, so I'm running out of time in that aspect too. So having that little bit of experience, like I even got to work for Bleacher Report when I was much younger, like way before they were as big as they were now. That was a lot of fun, writing blogs for them. I did one on Anderson, used to play for Manchester United, a Brazilian midfielder. And that's the first time I saw zeros. Like, there was like 40, 50,000 views on that. Nice. Comments galore. And to this day, I still have his contact information from that. I think he still follows me on my old Instagram. I don't think he follows my new Instagram, but we stayed in touch. Like, I got to interview Terrell Pryor, who ended up winning the Heisman Award, played for the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. His career kind of fell off the tracks, but his life was like just a nightmare. And those opportunities wouldn't have happened if I didn't just throw paper into the wind. Right. You never know where it lands. So my time with Rogers was great. My time with Comcast was fantastic. But neither job had any long-term benefits for me. And, now I'm working for Covers doing data entry for frig's sakes, trying to get a writing job with them. But, I'm learning. I need an education. And
so what are your plans? You said you were thinking about going to school or what? Like, 'cause I feel like your work experience could maybe speak for itself.
Well, and that's where I need to, like, talking with you eventually here, talking with you fellas too. I mean, about, the paths that you guys have taken over the last little bit. Like, I'm the old guy here talking to the young sages about what I need to do to get to the next step. But it's changed so much where I could be a dropout when I was a dropout and still get some decent jobs. Right. But I can't get that job, right? And
what would you like to do?
I don't know, brother. And that's the thing, like, it may not happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, with the podcast coming back, it was a big success during its first run, and I could not tell you how many people have messaged or asked me over the last here's the scale for you. Actually, this is crazy. So I did not put an episode or really market a single episode from December when it was gone up until when I checked the thing last week. Mm-hmm. I've had 19,000 plays on the show with zero promotion. Now, it doesn't sound like a big number.
No, man, that's...
But I had Xavier Moon on the show, for example. Since I had him on the show, he made it to the NBA. So...
people go and they look up that name. They find...
podcast. Oh, Xavier Moon podcast. Let me listen to this. I've seen how even just having, like, a foundation can still pay dividends monetarily. I'm not making much money off of my anchor at all. I think that those plays added up to like $10. But we were talking about Crowder earlier. That's peeled the page on the contract, like how open that whole thing came, and how a lot of these media companies are literally like slaves to big tech, slaves to the YouTubes and the Twitches of the world, if you will, that they're losing so much of what they deserve to put in their pocket. So if the podcast somehow, some way gets me, say, $200 a week or something, then do I need to actually go back to school? Because here I am doing journalism. Mm-hmm. It's my own space. It's my own way, my own time. Yeah. But if I have enough people listening that it's at least a part-time job, that's my goal. Yeah. I'd say, like, at the bare minimum is see what this next year with the show is going to be again. If the numbers peak to another level, and like I've got some pretty interesting guests popping on. I don't want to give away too many names, but like the first week I got my cousin. He's a Division I basketball player. He'd be on the show whether he was my cousin or not, but I got him coming on. I got a couple of Wanderers, past and present, coming on. I got a couple of actors coming on the show, musicians, the lineup is going to be interesting. And like I was saying earlier, talking about like the origins of the show, I never really aimed for that. I just wanted to aim to talk with people I enjoyed. But when you aim high, sometimes you realize that you enjoy those conversations too, even if they're full of pressure, full of expectation. So that would be my goal, though, to answer your question, brother, is to just be happy in whatever space I'm in the space, whether I'm doing it myself or I'm graduating 2 years after you guys or something, right? So, yeah, man. Yeah.
Cool. How deep are we right now? Where are we at? 35 minutes. Oh, okay. I feel
probably
like we were
like 25 of me talking.
That's kind of what I wanted. Talk a little bit about your involvement with the Halifax Wanderers.
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
And how you kind of began, because it seems like obviously you're not directly involved or a member of staff or anything, but it seems like you have good relationships with the people running the show over there, and you've been a regular attendee of the games since the inaugural season, and your mom as well, season ticket holder, and she's
Mama Missy, yeah,
shout out to her.
Yeah, it's when I say that's my club, I say it's my club. Yeah, it's been cool. My grandmother was passing away when we first heard tale of the club. And my mom was like the soccer mom. Like, it didn't matter if you were up 7-0 or down 7-0. She's yelling on the sideline, good job, good effort, blah, blah, blah. Like, my mom.
She's generally positive. She's not talking down to any of the players.
If my mom is in a bad mood or she's angry, something really happened.
And she's going to listen to this episode.
Probably.
You think?
Probably.
Yeah.
When you've met my mom.
I bet your mom.
Like, she is literally, like, you said it. She's the most positive person. Like I said, if she's mad at someone, they deserve it. If she's angry, something happened. Like
you've had like the players come over to your house.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. That's the biggest part of the story. So during that first year, like I said, my grandmother had just passed away. We were kind of still in a rut because my nanny was like the matriarch of the family. Like she kept the glue together. Family functions were always with her. She always kept us updated with news with other family. Like my grandmother was like it. And when she passed away, we all kind of fell off the tracks a little bit. I was like completely done. So like I moved in with my grandfather to take care of him. I'm still there with him. I got to pay rent, but I'm still there with him. And you know, it's been a blessing in the long form, but in the short form, we were all just so hurt that we had nothing to take our mind off of my grandmother. So we got the season tickets at that point. We were already kind of all for it, but we weren't really into the mood of it. Like we weren't really like looking forward to it as much as we would have. Our grandmother was supposed to come to the first game with us. Like Nanny would have loved that. Like it was literally something that could have just gone by the wayside. But when we went to that first game, man, it was just a connection. Like I had never seen my mother's eyes light up. I had never seen her so proud of people that she didn't even know. You could hear her on the television, like every time the ball, whoa, like she just became an extension of the club in a weird way. And it was immediate because it was after the very first game to Marvin. We were talking about Marvin off the air. I had played soccer against Marvin for years, and we remained friends on social media long after that. We had a lot of mutual friends and stuff. And
who was Marvin? Again?
So Marvin is he's the ticket manager for the team. I think he does general inquiries as well. And very importantly, he's also the diversity and inclusion manager for the entire league, if I'm not mistaken. He actually kind of spearheaded the entire league getting into the diversity space, especially when you're a league that has all these different cultures and races and places from all over the world. It's important to make sure the players and the staff have all their means taken care of. And Marvin was a really, really, really big proponent of that. But early on, that didn't exist. Marvin was just a ticket guy who'd walk around and make sure everybody was happy. But it was like the 75th minute of the very first game, and I had recognized Marvin, so I was just like, "Hey, bro, hey, Mr. Searl, what's happening, bro?" Like we talked, but he said, "I'll never forget it. They can hear you from coast to coast on One Soccer, Missy. We need you to keep it down." The whole section starts laughing. I'll never forget it. Fred, he's been a friend of ours now for 4 or 5 years, and that's the theme of this is family. Like, you'll hear me say friends and family so much because they're actually friends and family. They're not just fellow fans. Like, that's what the club is. And the very first time we ever met Fred said, "Well, now you just spurred us on to be louder. We're Scotian, damn it. The beer's cheap." Hey, everybody just go crazy. And, like, that immediate, I could see my mom was a part of something that was going to take her mind off of my grandmother. And I saw, she's brown. My mom's black. She's brown. I saw her. She got her skin back, the color in her skin back. Her energy was up. She was coming over more often to say hello. And, you know, the second game became the third game, became the fourth game. And what was happening was guys on the other teams were then starting to know who my mom was because, "Oh, you're the lady that screams on television. Oh, you're Mama Missy. Oh, we know you. We know you." So to keep it to theme with my grandmother, and this is who inspired it the first year. As the season went on, we got to know the guys like by name. We got to meet their girlfriends. We got to meet their family members. They'd come up to Mom. Mom was like the queen of the stadium. She got to hand out the Player of the Year award. Like she was just like all these little things. But so yeah, when a lot of the guys would leave at the same time because they're all Canadians, right? So they basically would take like a plane from Halifax to Montreal, to Toronto, to Calgary, to Vancouver, and like stop by stop the guys would get off. But the international guys would have to stay until their contracts were up. It was part of the agreement. Mm-hmm. So during the first season, Akeem Garcia, who was the leading scorer, and
he's retired now. Is he not?
Yeah, he's an executive director, I believe, at Suburban. I could be wrong with that. He could be like a scouting person or something, but
Which is a local soccer club.
Yeah, Suburban is one of the newer clubs, but they're very quickly building a little bit of a reputation of good history. Like they're
they have a
very
office
successful.
Space, I believe.
Oh yeah. Like
I
Suburban.
was in Bedford filming that story that I did for Global, and we were parked before we went to do the interview, and I was like in a strip mall across the street, and it was like Suburban FC, and I was like, what is that?
Yeah,
I was surprised to see that.
Great
it was
club.
Yeah,
great club. So yeah, the first time, Kim Garcia, Zoom Langlois, who's also since retired, he's coaching Ottawa Selects. Andre Bona, he's also retired. He's coaching RNS in New Brunswick. Jan Michael Williams, he's also retired. He's now the goalkeeping coach for the Wanderers. He's kept his roots here. And crazy story, he played against Messi once. I have like such a crazy story to tell you about that. I might tell you on the air. Remind me after. I don't want to forget the story. And Chris Insa, who is Canadian but was really close with those guys, so he stuck around. And then towards the end of the year, Duran Lee, who the Wanderers signed that year from Vaughan, he was kind of homesick. And Mom said, you guys want to come over and have dinner? And Zoom said, yeah, why not? Can I bring some friends? So he brought some friends, and it was all these Wanderers players, and some of them had girlfriends, and they all came over, and it was a feast, and it was It was a feast, and it was super entertaining, and it was great to get to know these guys at a personal level, because you see them as just these dots on the field, and they get paid to play a sport, so they can't have emotion, but when you get to know their stories, you respect them way more.
That's something I always wonder as well, just watching, just like how you can compete in that environment. You have, you say like your mom is yelling, and then you have people that are yelling, trying to distract you as well, and you're just trying to stay so focused.
Some guys, man.
Like, I wonder if your mind ever.
Well, some guys on the other teams, I'll use the other teams as an example. Some of these guys are stone cold. Mm-hmm. Like, you could literally say the worst shit about their mom, and their mom might be dead.
Yeah, they might not even.
And they don't budge. Right. And then there's some guys who just can't help it. And I'm not trying to be rude. Some of these markets don't have big crowds. Like when Edmonton comes to Halifax, like
they're discontinued.
That's
right?
yeah,
so,
unfortunately, sucks, man. Great history with FC Edmonton. I'm hoping Fonzie brings them back, and once he gets a couple bucks in his pocket, he'll bring them back. I hope. But
he's hurting for money right now.
Yeah, probably a little tiny bit. No, but no. Some guys just can't help it, and I can't tell you how many guys that we've talked to, pardon me, on other teams. That's the biggest crowd they've ever played in front of.
Yes, because Halifax has the biggest turnout of any team.
But like some of these guys, they've played even in Europe,
mm-hmm.
and they played in front of a couple of thousand people, probably rowdy, probably like as loud as we are, but not 6,500 people that are actually like raucous. Like for the very most part, that stadium is moving, it's grooving, and it's cool that guys have come to play in Halifax because of us, because of Mom, because of the culture,
because they want to play in front of a crowd that's supporting them and that is actively going to turn out every game, no matter how they're doing.
Win, lose, or draw, man. Like, that's it. So
talking about like your relationship with it's Marvin, right?
Yep.
Like, did they expect that to be the term? Was he with them since the first season?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So did they know that was going to be the norm for every game prior to the season starting?
No.
Like, did they think that maybe they'd sell half the capacity? Or
the beauty of that question that you asked,
because all those games are sold out now.
Every game, pretty much. Yeah. I think that every game except for during the first year, the Canadian Championship second leg against Valor, they didn't include the tickets in the package. It was a Wednesday and it was rainy, and then post-COVID, in terms of percentage of tickets sold, always 90+
for every home game.
I'm pretty sure, even including those COVID games where it was like 2,500 people there, all split up and shit. But I had the opportunity actually to talk to Derek Martin. We did a roundtable interview with him when I was with Down the Pub right before COVID. And I actually asked him that question. Like, obviously the season exceeded your expectations. That's no question. But by how much? And that was his biggest answer, was we didn't expect to see gradual growth as the season went and then a peak where now we're talking about expanding the stadium. And he has over the last 3 years.
But they want to expand it, what, 10,000?
10,000, I think, is what he said.
I even read when back in the, I think it was in the spring, it was towards the end of my first internship with Global, they were trying to, they were doing a story, because I did a story on the Wanderers as well. I interviewed Andre Rampersad and what's his name? I'm blanking right now. Jamaican international.
Oh, Alex Marshall.
Alex Marshall.
Another one of Mom's dinner friends. Yes.
Yeah.
Great
and
kid, man. Great
they were
kid.
at Global reaching out to me my last day to see if I had some contacts, because they were doing a story on the talks of like the stadium expansion. And I think that they mentioned that they thought that like because of the World Cup coming here in 2026, that could maybe serve as a location for people to buy tickets to just watch some of like the world's biggest international.
Basically,
stars
call them like a
practice.
campsite.
Yeah.
So you said it like so. If the games ended up in Montreal or Moncton was even on the FIFA short list, because they've got that stadium up there that they were talking, if the World Cup came, they could expand that thing to like 35,000. But I mean, Moncton was never going to get Moncton was never going to get the World Cup. Let's be completely honest here. But they were on the short list.
No way.
If Moncton ended up getting it, Halifax would have been 100% a base city camp. But I don't think we're in the range right now.
Have those cities been announced yet?
Toronto and Vancouver.
Yeah.
I think Edmonton didn't make it because they couldn't fix Commonwealth. And they didn't want to put the renovation money into the Olympic Stadium in Montreal. And Saputo's not big enough. So, yeah, the only two cities that had anything... Actually, I think BC Place was the only stadium in Canada that met FIFA standards. They still have to renovate BMO. They're not even using the Rogers Center for the World Cup. And it's like 60,000 plus people if you want to get them in there. They're using BMO. But I think BMO will be closer to like 40-something thousand by the time the World Cup comes. But
it's about 30,000 right now, right?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's, regarding that, Derek, having the opportunity to talk to him over and over again, if things continue on the trajectory they are now, yeah, Halifax is more than likely going to end up being a campsite, even if it's for Boston or New York. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be for a Canadian city, because we've shown here, and I'm talking about every market in North America. I'm not just talking Canada, and I'm not just talking second or third division. I'm talking including the MLS markets. What the Wanderers have done is put like a star on the map, and we're on every single executive's bucket list all over North America. What are they doing? They're this town that's a hockey town. They've got no professional sports except for lacrosse, which also draws, but that's a different story.
We didn't know that. We were
It's
like,
crazy.
maybe we should get some of the Thunderbirds players on here, try to get the word out. Then I saw a video and it's packed.
Yeah, man, they're doing great again. Well, they were sold out before COVID. Like, COVID could have.
And you can see the success of the
ruined
World
them
Juniors as well. I mean,
big time. So Halifax has
obviously demand.
It's awkward
And it's overdue.
It's awkward too, because like there's not a whole lot of effort being put into making it happen. Derek said it from the beginning. We don't own the stadium. We've barely got running water. The concessions we have to rent in, and he's still doing that 5 years later, and nothing's fallen off at all. It's still only gotten bigger and better. The ticket prices have gone up slightly. People are still buying them. So every executive in North America right now, whether their stadium is like ours, 6,000, 10,000, 20,000, they're not filling them. What's Halifax doing? How are they doing it? So Derek, Matt Fegan, who puts the team together, Marvin, and other names too that have since gone on, like Dave Finlinson. He's a great guy. He's moved on since. Jamie McGinnis during the first year, he's moved on since. There's a few other names too I can't really think of off the top of my head right now, but the network that the Wanderers have created has made us the talk of the town, where I actually think come 2026, there's a possibility that a team is going to camp here, because we will fill their 6,000 seat stadium to watch a practice. And if they have a friendly against the Wanderers, we're going to fill it.
Just like fucking Argentina versus the Halifax.
Yeah, could you imagine? No, we'll get like Cyprus or something, whoever qualifies in 2026, like a small country. But it's amazing. It's amazing to see the growth, bro. And like, we never had this growing up. You know, I grew up in a junior hockey atmosphere. Like, I loved watching the Mooseheads. I had season tickets. My friends had season tickets. We grew up on the Mooseheads. But once we got older, like, you know, once you're in your like mid-20s to 30s going to watch teenage hockey players, there is kind of an element of, I still want to support the boys, but I can't really be into it like I was when I was a teenager. there's nothing here in the city. Like the basketball franchises have all completely failed. Although the women's league last year they started out was quite successful. But what was the niche that this city could potentially, like, what's that itch that needs to be scratched? It turns out it was soccer. And you know, my mom being a part of that is like my biggest treasure, because like now I have a son. My brother has a son with a daughter on the way. They're going to grow up. That's their grandmother's soccer team. Like all the boys know Bibi. They all know Bibi. Like that's grandma in Swahili. They love it's just been such a big part of our family. And that's what it is. Like Mike is family. Denton is family. Anthony's family. Carlos is family. Jess is family. Like they're not friends. They're not season ticket holders. Whether it's 2 games in 5 days or 2 games in a month, we look forward to those days. We plan to be together those days. So like it's just what
it's
my
like a weekly family reunion.
It is. That's a really good way of putting it, actually. And it has that feel. It has that atmosphere. Like the club has been accused by people that don't know what they're talking about, of just grabbing dollars and dimes, if you will. Like, oh, they're not putting the best team on the field.
That doesn't seem to make a difference.
4 to 5 of those 6,000 people at every game don't give a fuck. I stress to anybody.
The mood is pretty upbeat, even if they have a disappointing loss.
Yes, man.
I don't know if I've ever seen them win.
That's funny. Well, that's
Hopefully
it,
that'll
though,
be
man.
different this year. They have a new coach.
And that's it. Like, new direction, new coach. As much as, you know, bless Mr. Hart. Steven was an incredible guy.
I've been reading that Voyagers book about the history of the Canadian men's national team, and I knew that he was the former coach, but I didn't know how revolutionary his style and attitude was. Like, they had him as like an interim coach for a period, and they already had someone else hired, but a lot of the players didn't want to play under the coach that they temporarily replaced him with at the time, and they brought him back.
As unceremoniously as his time ended with both the Canadian national team and the Wanderers, I don't think either are in the place that they're in without him. Mm-hmm. And I hope I've been blessed. I mean, Steven and my son are buddies. They play hide and seek all the time. Like whenever we go to see a practice
Does he still
or
live
something.
in Halifax?
I don't think he's here now. I don't know if he was here a long time. Like he was coaching SMU women. And I believe he was also...
He went to university in Halifax as well.
And played for KOD. Or did he coach KOD?
Both.
I think, he might have been the player coach. You're right.
I just was reading about this. Like,
both, so you would know.
Former Wanderers coach, yeah.
But you know, Steven's career may not come laden with trophies, but at the end of the day, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, the Wanderers are because of Stephen Hart. The Canadian national team making it to the World Cup this year or last year and doing what they did. I mean, we can joke and laugh about how rough the group stage was, but I mean, I take great pride in how the boys played all 3 of those games. I mean, even the Croatia game, it was rough, but like they never quit.
Fastest goal scored in the entire World Cup.
And they didn't quit. Honestly, I think that
should have at least drew.
The goal was a curse. I even remember saying in the bar, I feel like I was the jinx. I remember looking at my brother and I'm like, that's too early. And he was like, yeah. And the tactics all completely changed. And 4-1 next thing you knew. But
that was so disheartening, man.
So much of that, even though Steven only coached, I think, 1 player on that team. Maybe 2.
Probably Atiba Hutchinson and
it was
maybe
Atiba. Junior Hollett, I think. I don't know about...
He probably played against Man U today. Reading.
Probably, yeah. Junior Hollett?
Yeah. Or that's later today, I think.
4 o'clock. Yeah. I'm trying to think of... The Spurs is at 2, United's at 4. But no, Steven is first and foremost a friend and a family member. Like him and my mom, whether it was win, lose, or draw, and you could see how defeated he was. Whenever he saw my mom, his face lit up. A lot of those guys, whenever they saw my mom, their face lit up. And Peter Shalla, he's since been gone now, but Peter is one of the staples of the club's history over the first 4 seasons.
He came from CBU, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, and him and Corey both. I had watched him and Corey play when they were literally like kids with CBU. So like this year is going to be so heavy for me because like this is the first time in like 6 or 7 years I don't get to see Peter play. Like I've watched him play so much U Sports soccer whenever CBU were in town. But Peter said to me, and this was like the staple, and this was like the definition of what my mom meant to this club, is you never really wanted to let Missy down, but you knew you never did. So you at least have to smile for her. And that is always stuck with me. And, you know, whether it was Peter or Rampy or even guys that were here briefly like Portal, Duran, he was only here for a few months. These guys all have a mom story. And, like, to me, that's what this club is all about. There's hundreds of families probably in the city that have similar stories like us, but I take a lot of pride in the fact that the club recognizes mom as being that first fan that opened their doors to these guys as family. So that's kind of like the full circle of like the Wanderers history. But yeah, we sit in section 104. So if y'all are listening and you want to know the best place to sit in the stadium, it's not the kitchen. It's section 104. We make just as much noise and have just as much fun. It's just not quite as rowdy or consistent. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this season. I'm hoping the boys definitely pull through. It's going to be pretty fresh, but the fact guys like Andre Rampersad is coming back, Jake Ruby's coming back, and a few other names.
They haven't necessarily determined what the roster would be, right? Because I went on the website because I'm trying to do this is an assignment for school. I want to do like a kind of podcast series where I interview some of the international players and kind of talk about what brought them here and stuff. Maybe that could just translate into this podcast as well. But I know that they recently signed that he played in he was in PSG's academy.
Thiago, yeah. Like I said, I can't share too much because I don't want to get skinned by Marvin. But just about all the signings are completed, and there are a few names to come. One name specifically for sure is a player that will put asses in the seats. It's not Jacob Schaffelberg. I'm gonna nip that in the bud right now because every time I say that, everybody's like, "Is Schaffelberg coming back?" No, he just signed a contract extension in Nashville. He ain't coming back to play for us. But
and Nashville hypes him up a lot too, more than TFC.
Well, he saved their season, man. Like they were about to miss the playoffs, and Toronto loaned him there. He scored 2 of the biggest goals in the club's history. So it's obvious.
Where is he from? He's from just like
Port Wallace, I think. Yeah, I think it's Port Wallace. Just it's kind of crazy to see how like a kid from up there is a soccer genius like he is, and all these kids in the city don't quite get there. Like, what did he have? And maybe he had nothing else to do but play. That's possibly it. But the team is for the very most part signed. I believe they're still going to look at the under-23 program. The invites for that were just sent out. A couple of the players have like kind of announced that they got invited, so we're starting to see that list fill up now. And then of course there's the trials that happen right before the season starts, where you get some youth sports guys that probably only want to come to the club just to finish the summer. And some hidden gems who over the last few years the club have signed a few players that they had no anticipation or expectation to sign, and they end up being pieces of a bigger puzzle. So I'm excited to see what Patrice Geyser does this season with the group. I think that there's a little less pressure on him than there was on Steven, which I think could translate to some better football. I think the guys may have been in their own head a little bit over the last 2 years, knowing not only are they playing for themselves, but possibly for the gaff or two. But just the fact that there's a club, man, that's it. And I hope that the greater Halifax recognizes that. And like you said, it's kind of already shown that face. Like, they haven't won many games. Last place, second last place.
They always seem to play well. For the most part, like from many games that I've watched.
And I don't want to toot our horn. That might be us, right? Like the culture of us, the fans, not ever quitting on them. They don't want to let us down. And, you know, when they lose at home, they don't lose. They lose 1-0, 2-1.
Aside from that game that I went to when they lost 4-0.
Oh, the Cavalry game. Oh, man. Or was that Forge? I think
it was Forge.
That was Forge. Schwanner. Yeah, that was a rough one. Yeah, there were 2 bad ones. Cavalry and Forge. But yeah, like it's amazing to see, like you said, man, a weekly family reunion, and long may it last, man. Derek and Matt have done an incredible job, and I can't wait for April. I cannot wait. I think the home opener is April 30th. That's not public yet. It might be public by the time this is out.
I think I would have saw that, but all right, actually no, I think you might have said that before we started recording. But
April 15th is Ottawa.
Yeah, that's like the first game of the whole.
That's the first of the whole season. So they'll probably have another game after that. Probably in Ontario. They'll probably like go to Ottawa, and then they'll play either like York or Forge. Yeah. And then they'll come back home for a game or two. I'm thinking. I'm hoping.
I'm assuming we're getting close to an hour. Are we not? We hit an hour?
Cool.
Okay, so before we wrap up, you just said that they have a player that's signed that will put
asses in the seats.
Is this someone that is like in the Canadian soccer circuit is a recognizable name, or like how would they put asses in the seats without telling us who that is?
Recognizable enough with a local touch.
Local as in Nova Scotia, or local as in? Okay, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I mean,
you were gonna take a shot. You were gonna take a shot at it at the end.
No, I was gonna think. I don't know. But what's coming up next for you? So you're gonna launch the podcast.
Yes.
Maybe it'll be out around the time that this comes out, or next week from right now. We're recording this.
Bro. Yes,
January 28th.
aside from work and dad life, I even took next week off just to literally commit to the pod. So I got a couple of interviews lined up, and I'm gonna literally like interview, edit out. I got the blessing of the boys back to bring the 10 count back too, so there'll be an episode of that out next week. And I'm hoping, man, best case scenario, a 4 to 5 episode a week project, something that I could really put my foot into, whether it's those 10, 15-minute things that we talked about or a 2-3 hour conversation. I'm just looking forward to getting back into the flow. You know how much I enjoyed it. You know how much I enjoyed talking to you and just enjoying the company, whether it's in person or via Zoom, with people that I truly enjoy spending time with. So, yeah, man, my name is Searl. You can still listen to it and find all the episodes on all the podcast networks. They're a little dated now, but if you're listening to this guy and you haven't heard any of our interviews, they are definitely worth a fucking listen, man. Like, our shows are just like wild. Like, we just talk about fucking everything. I remember
they were some of my favorite interviews I've ever done. I think
the interview when you told us about the helicopter. That's one of my favorite sound bites from the first season. The helicopter, how like you guys like rushed to get there, and then you couldn't go because of the weather. And like I've been listening back to the first season, and I'm just enjoying where I was. This season is gonna be like 10 times more enjoyable just because I know that I can do it, and the right people are gonna be in the space with me. So. Yes, my name is Searl. Check it out.
Hell yeah, man. And where can people find you? Instagram,
Oh, geez. No Twitter. Instagram, Christofsky.
Spell that out.
Chris. And instead of the letter T, it's a 2. And then Ofski. I'm hoping to get back the original Christofsky social media page. But that being said, keep an eye out as well for a My Name is Searl standalone page. Something I was like aiming to do to start the second season anyways. And it's taken as long as it has, but yeah, that's where y'all can find me.
Sweet, man. Well, Chris Searl, thank you so much for coming on the show.
This was a blast, man.
First guest.
I hope I answered the questions at least sufficiently.
You killed it, man. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll be back whenever we're back.
Bless.
Peace out.